My name is SHIVAN VIPOND, and I'm the Secretary Treasurer of the Alberta Federation of Labour. And it's my pleasure to be your MC today. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th commemorative event, which is the day that we recognize nationally, the Day of Remembrance, as well as a day of action to stop violence against women. At the Alberta Federation of Labour, we recognize that we are all treaty people with treaty obligations. We respectfully acknowledge that we are in various locations around the province. I'm currently in my house, which is on Treaty 6 territory, but we also want to acknowledge Treaty 7 and Treaty 8, where you may be joining us from. These are traditional gathering places for diverse Indigenous peoples, including Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwa, Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, Inuit, Siksika, and Piikani, and Kainai, and Tsuut'ina, and the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, including Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nation 5. We recognize the history of oppression for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people in their traditional land across Canada, and we are committed to doing the ongoing and active work of reconciliation. As a labor movement, we will actively work with you in solidarity to end oppression and seek justice for all peoples on our land. We want to invite Linda Robinson to give blessings at our event today. Many of you know Linda. Linda is a mother and a grandmother, an Indigenous woman, and a polio survivor. She has a passion for social justice and a long history of community activism. Linda currently co-chairs the Living into Right Relations Committee of the United Church of Canada, which seeks to facilitate reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people of Alberta and the Northwest Territories. And of course, Linda is a retired AFL staff member and an important part of our labor movement. The floor is yours.
So Creator, help us to be silent for a moment as we remember that it's been 31 years since 14 young women at the École Polytechnique in Montreal were gunned down by a man they never knew simply because they were women. 31 years and still the violence continues. Creator, 2020 has seen violence against women increase because of the pandemic. As COVID-19 cases continue to strain health services, essential services such as domestic violence shelters and helplines have reached capacity. More women and children are trapped in volatile and abusive situations with no place to seek safety. Isolation and the severing of work and family support networks have played a major role in higher than average violence against women occurrences this year. Creator, we pray for all the women living with domestic violence, that they find shelter. We pray for the families of murdered and missing Indigenous women. May they find peace. We pray for the men that commit these horrific crimes. May they seek help to heal their ways. Creator, bring us justice, bring us healing, bring us hope. Hi, hi.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you for your great words. It's good for us to center what today is about, and that really helps us do that. So I'm so happy you could join us again this year, and it's a pleasure to see you during these times.
Same here.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so thanks to Linda, and of course you heard earlier the music was being played by Dale, and so Dale is an internationally renowned Chapman Stick singer-songwriter, and she has performed with Bruce Cockburn, Angelique Kidjo, Bill Eddins, Richie Havens, and others. She performs solo or with her band, The Broke Ensemble. She is currently working on a new album to add to her 3 previous recordings, and we're really happy that Dale was able to join us. Sometimes on these virtual kind of events, the change is we kind of lose some of that feeling. And so I'm just happy you could be here and play that for us and kind of set the tone, which was just wonderful. And today, in addition to Linda and Dale, we are very happy to have SHIVA NOURPANAH, who is the provincial coordinator of the Transition House Association of Nova Scotia, to speak with us, and DWENNIMMEN, who aka Shima Robinson, who's a spoken word artist who will also be here with us today. And so I think that is a wonderful program that we will have to mark today. So as we gather today from wherever we are, it's important for us to have this day to think and to remember, but also to recommit ourselves to the ongoing work that needs to be done in order to end violence against women and girls. And so when we talk about that as a group, it is a kind of to increase our understanding, to increase our commitment, but to ensure that it doesn't get forgotten. And I think in these days when, unless it's COVID related, we see that it kind of is not seen as important. And that's not the reality when it comes to violence. Unfortunately, this year we have seen increases in violence. We've seen the challenges when women and families don't have access to the services that they need when negotiating these kinds of conditions. And it leaves us in a vulnerable position, but also reiterates the importance of this work that we need to do together. And so today, normally we are having brunch together. So I hope you had a lovely nourishing meal today in your own place, but we will come together for this event. We're really happy we were able to offer this at no charge, but we are still doing a fundraiser. And so we'll talk about that at the end. And that's only for those who are able to give. But we often have this as a way to raise funds within the labor movement for various charities. And this year will be to raise funds for the Justice Fund, which is the Alberta Federation of Labor Justice Fund with the Alberta Council of Women's Shelters. And so we'll be sharing the link in the chat for you to have there. But first, let me introduce our speaker. And we're very excited that she was able to make time to join us today. And of course, the wonderful thing about virtual world is that able to join us from home in Nova Scotia. And so SHIVA NOURPANAH is the provincial coordinator of the Transition House Association of Nova Scotia and an SSHRC Post-Doctoral Fellow at the Centre for Study of Social and Legal Responses to Violence at the University of Guelph. Her areas of research include refugee and immigration affairs and gender-based violence. Formerly, she worked for 8 years for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees Office in Iran. She has published work on women's human rights in refugee aid, the experiences of settlement and integration of Afghan refugees in Halifax, and sexual and gender-based violence in refugee narratives. And so please, we should be able to hear and see Shiva soon, so we can hear her speak today. Shiva, are you able to speak yet?
Hi, can you hear me? Can you see me?
Perfect. Yes, we can hear and see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. Thank you for inviting me to your event.
Excellent. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. And it was with great honor that I accepted Siobhan's invitation to participate and join in this virtual ceremony. It really brings home how across Canada, across different sectors, women are working to remember the victims of this horrific, toxic, violent male misogyny against women, which continues to mar society, to mar our societies. And I have to start with a personal, just to contextualize my remarks, I'm starting with like a personal connection. I'm an Iranian immigrant, and when I tell my folks back in Iran about the work that I do here, and the needs that arise, and the Day of Remembrance, and the misogyny, and the gender-based violence, and the femicide, and they can't believe it. Canada globally is at the forefront of gender rights and women's rights and security and progress and women's equality. And they literally think I'm joking. And it's like an uphill challenge when I convince them that no, we still have these issues in a country which is known globally as a bastion of human rights, as a bastion of women's equality and progress. we are still working with victims of domestic violence, of intimate partner violence, victims of human trafficking, sexual assault, date rape, across the spectrum of violence against women and their children and their families, their communities. There continues to be this ongoing harm, and it's just mind-blowing for people. Like, how can we see an end? You know, on our website, on the Transition House Association website, and on websites of similar organizations, we have, you know, our mandate is to eliminate gender-based violence. And especially this year, which has of course been a very hard year, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. And it is at moments like this when our sisters from across the country in different parts and different sectors reach out and assure us of, you know, the solidarity and the goodwill that this is what gives us hope, and this is what keeps us strong. We have the words, we are working to eliminate gender-based violence. And a year like this, 2020, it feels as though it's been such a setback. It feels that, well, not that it feels, there are reports, there are documents which reporting on the so-called regress of women's labor situation across globally, and also across the country, across Canada. And it is therefore these moments and these get-togethers, these virtual ceremonies become even more important, I think, in the face of the enormous challenges that 2020 has brought for women in Canada and also globally. So the other personal connection that I want to make is that I am an Iranian immigrant, but I've made Nova Scotia my home, and I've been living here in this beautiful province for the past 10 years with my family. And of course, it's with Nova Scotia, as we all know, was the site of the horrific mass shootings of April 2020, where a gunman went on a rampage, and the reasons are not completely clarified yet, but he killed 18 people or more in one of what was probably in the worst mass shooting incident in the history of Canada. And as facts were revealed about the case, it became more and more clear that domestic violence and intimate partner violence played a very strong role. There was a very clear tie-in with domestic violence in this horrific shooting, which really scarred Nova Scotian communities, Nova Scotian families, and triggered a lot of anxiety for women working in the sector and for their clients, as you know, they encountered this terrible event, in some cases like on their doorstep, minutes away. So and of course, leading on from that, in Nova Scotia, again, it has been a very challenging year. Of course, there's a pandemic, which we're struggling, and Siobhan talked eloquently to, and as did Linda, the capacity issues and the challenges in the sector not brought about by the pandemic, but how the pandemic shone a light on the continued underfunding and the capacity issues which exist in the women's, which have been existing, where activists and workers and advocates have known that these issues existed. The pandemic really shone this glaring light, and then we had this series of shocking tragedies informed by male violence. We had the stab. As one of our journalists noted, the first victim after the pandemic was announced in March 2020 was not actually the first person who died in Nova Scotia wasn't because of COVID. It was what seems to be of domestic violence. It was in a domestic violence incident, and we've had this kind of series of shocking events driven by male violence, of course, the mass shooting being the worst, but we continue to see. And the kind of common theme which or one of the aspects which really affects us in the sector is, on the one hand, we have the kind of male violence and the kind of toxic gender hostility, which is a kind of binding theme of all these events. But on the other hand, we have the system responses and the structural responses and the social-cultural context which form the kind of societal background and narrative around these events. And that in itself is part of the challenge, working with the system responses to these events, assuring that, we will listen to women, we are open, we are welcoming, the women, if they can do so safely, should be able to come forward and seek help. So it's almost, we're fighting this, we're in this double bind, that on the other hand, that on one hand, there are the perpetrators of violence against women, and the immediate support and the care and the resources and services which women and their families who are in this terrible situation require. But then on the other hand, as this kind of additional burden, we have this uphill challenge of working with an increasingly complicated system, where the responses to situations of violence against women are not always trauma-informed, they're not always human-centered, they're not always, and that continues to remain a challenge. And meanwhile, in this very complex landscape where we have this host of barriers and issues, whether we're talking psychological, mental, emotional, physical, financial, economical, and of course, this is happening against the backdrop of the pandemic. And as I mentioned earlier, we have continued reports that women are being further marginalized because of patriarchal structures. The pandemic is causing women to become further marginalized in labor markets. We are regressing economically, and at the same time, domestic violence is increasing. And let's connect those dots, right? And let's develop that kind of holistic, comprehensive view on the situation of women. What better time and what better day to do it than now? And let's think about, as we become financially more vulnerable, as we are pushed, as women are pushed to the margins of labor market, as we are losing out on stable work, where we are well compensated in accordance to the needs, and we also become more financial to others. So we really want to expand our thinking about abuse, right? Abuse isn't just physical, it's physical, but it's also being financially vulnerable. It's also financial abuse. It's also emotional abuse. It's also not knowing if you leave a volatile situation, not knowing if you'll become homeless, not knowing where you have to go. It's also not knowing how to pay lawyer fee, not knowing if you'll lose your children. So there is this like increasing complexity and increasing darkness around the situation of women, which makes the work that we're all doing even more vital. We're always very proud and pleased to have the supportive unions for our work. Both NSGU and NSNU are staunch supporters of our work, and we really appreciate and acknowledge their generosity towards us, and as well as our government funders and of course private donors, all of which continue to form the backbone of our work. And as we're talking about, and it does seem appropriate at this moment, and as we are talking about, well, as I am talking about the work that needs to be done, right, in this increasingly complicated landscape, where there exist these bright moments, such as now, such as today, where for a very tragic event, yet we're still able to make these connections and able to forge these networks and, emotionally recharge ourselves. It's also, I think it's worthy of note to think about the work that is being done. the work in order to support women and victims and survivors of violence against women, their families, their communities, because let's make no mistake, violence against women is not a private issue. It's a public issue. It's a public health matter. Hence, why we, throughout the pandemic, were conferencing with public health officials every other week, basically. And we have to have that recognition. We have to move beyond the, oh, this is private, they need to sort it out by themselves, and acknowledge that violence against women is public. And let's think about the work that we have to do in order to redress those wrongs and in order to help heal those harms and support women as they experience that, as they go through this terrible experience of experiencing violence. And let's think about the workers, in shelters and violence against women organizations and outreach offices, and women who are working in hard conditions, putting their own safety and health on the line. We all know that traditionally in our societies, women's work and work which is traditionally associated with care work, nursing, teaching, we all know that these jobs are undervalued, they're underappreciated, they're often invisible, they're intersectional, they're often, as far as possible, they are downloaded to people of racial minorities, many of whom travel to Canada in order to perform care work and so on. What is often not considered when talking about and examining and assessing care work is the work done in the women's sector for the support of women. So not only is women's work invisible, but the work women do to support women is invisible. And now, in talking with the Alberta Federation of Labour, I encourage you to make that work visible. So we are having women work in positions, they dedicate their career. We had a long service award ceremony last year where we made awards to fantastic women who had dedicated their entire career of 35 years or more to working frontline in shelters, dedicating their careers to poorly paid, poorly compensated, overlooked, underappreciated work in shelters, to support their sisters at their time of need. And we need to make that work visible, right? We need to make the expertise, the care, the passion, the advocacy, which is being done in our women's sector every day. We need to keep talking about it and to remind people that, we see these terrible, shocking images of women murdered, women missing, women harmed, women stabbed, whatever, strangled. We see these shocking images on the media. We've become desensitized at this point, right? But remember that there is this army of women behind, like in the background of society. And let's remember, a lot of shelters and women's organizations were literally like camouflaged, right? They were actually for security purposes, for very good reason in their communities. They just look like normal houses. The personal anecdote I can share with you, a couple of years ago when I started working in this position, I had a errand to run at one of our houses and my daughter was with me. So we went together and I ran into a house to drop something off and I came back in and she was like, where did you go? Where was the office? And I was like, that's the workplace. That's where women are working. There is no sign on it. It is invisible, right? And it suddenly dropped for her. I just saw that recognition on her face where she said, oh, right, these places are invisible. They're amongst us, but they're hidden in our neighborhoods. But let's keep talking about them, right? I know, again, when I started this position, a lot of my friends, all very well-educated, highly educated people, they didn't know what a transition house was. I didn't know what a transition house was. I was shocked to realize we need transition houses. So as I bring my remarks to an end, I want to, and I talked about a lot of awful things that have happened across the world and across the province and in our province of Nova Scotia. I think, but I want to finish, on a hopeful note and, on a note of, on a rousing note that let's remember these awful things are happening, but at the same time, there's a lot of work, of expertise, of there's a whole army of women, right, in the background who's helping to overcome the suffering and overcome the pain and support support the victims of gender-based violence. So on that note, Siobhan, I think I'm done, and I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. You've given us a lot to think about, and also it's so important for us to remember those invisible stories, unfortunately, so often. So thank you, and the importance of work. We are so happy that you could come and join us. And,
Not at all. Thank you for having me.
That. Oh yeah, absolutely. Excellent. So our next part of our program is we will be bringing Shima Robinson, who is a spoken word artist, and so to perform for our sisters. And so I just wanted to, so DWENNIMMEN is her pen name, and so Amiskwa Twewa Kaken, or AKA Edmonton, Treaty 6 born poet and spoken word artist Shima Robinson embodies with every poem the ancient meaning of her chosen pen name. DWENNIMMEN is the name of the ancient African Adrika symbol, which means strength, humility, learning, and wisdom. It is no surprise then that this veteran of the Alberta poetry community uses a searing intellect and dynamic precision of language to create poetry which ushers her readers and listeners towards greater understanding and poignant reflection. For DWENNIMMEN, poetry has long been a compass, a salve, an anchor, and a guiding light. She uses the potential and force of poetry to uncover the full range of her cerebral, linguistic, and spiritual fortitude. This is why her every poem and performance testifies to an emerging power and wisdom, an authentic, deeply human potency, which she hopes to pass on to listeners and poetry lovers around the world. Please join me in welcoming DWENNIMMEN, and here is For My Sisters. Are we, just want to confirm we can get your mic up?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Yes. So I brought a poem to share with the collected audience today, and it is called For My Sisters. It goes like this. Geneviève Bergeron, Nathalie Croteau, Anne-Marie Edouard, Maryse Lagagnère, Anne-Marie Lemay, Michel Richard, Annie Turcotte, Hélène Colgan, Barbara Daigneault, Maude Aviernick, Maryse Leclerc, Sonia Pelletier, Annie Saint-Arnaud, and Barbara Klucznik-Wydajewicz. Water collects in the bowls of the benches of a pink granite memorial to the cherished remembrance of those 14 women, who, though fallen, are not forgotten. We call this memorial the marker for change, a place to contemplate. I once fled into the sanctuary of its circular enclosure, my life in my hands, my head outlandish, fraught with thoughts that read like an apology, my guilty heart obstructing honesty. The marker for change stopped my wandering feet and led me to reflect on the strength of women. That day, in the infancy of my renewed spirit, I realized that every woman in the world is my sister. I am a Canadian woman, second generation bilingual, who was taught about the massacre at École Polytechnique de Montréal that took place in 1989 when I was only 5, learning my ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, looking up to my single mother, another torchbearer, as 14 women were gunned down, accused of feminism, killed for existing. And I have seen that same accusation fly across a limited space and slap me in the face on more than one occasion. And I can only rail against the disgraceful implication that we are guilty for valuing ourselves. So for my mother and every other woman struggling in every corner of the planet, enveloped in hope and dragged out by damage, for taking no shorts, for being the best she can manage, for staying strong and hanging on because the worst is over, because the best is yet to come. I love you as a sister. One man's act of obscene violence crushed the dreams of more than those 14 women, shot down into our lamenting memories, salt tears, rubbed into the wound of ages, yet defying silence. We cannot hear the screams of our countless murdered women, but we can feel their reverberations slipping under our thickening skin as we go about the company of our fellowship, putting pens to paper and mics to mouths, making the statements that assuage our doubts, exercising our rights to speak the strength of our voices, live the strength of our choices, and our onus to defend the weaker among us until they emerge from the ranks of the voiceless, rising in chorus, following the ring of the chant that came before us, as we are here to fight hatred with our unabating brightness, our guiding beacons that lead the lost back to safe haven and chase the demons of a culture that vilifies women to the edges of its origins, muddy and sightless, where we trap them at the source of their horrible creation and wage peace on that forsaken place, where we find release for our fury, fists raised despite the pure pain of knowing that our sisters are being stolen. With urgency tempered by patience and teaching the wholeness of compassion, passionate, bold, and unrepentant, I hold the conviction that every woman in the world is my sister. Every woman in the world is my sister. Every woman in the world is my sister, near and dear to my heart. Whether kidnapped by Boko Haram or hitchhiking back to town, cooking dinner for the mister, or attending lectures, or incarcerated, or disabled, or on raw, war-weary battlegrounds wearing blisters on her laden way to the refugee camp where she is to give birth, there is no expunging her worth. The inscriptions in the pink granite memorial reminded me of the indelible mark I am to impress on the beating heart of this world. The transgressions and atrocities that taunt the lonesome into contortions of hopelessness do not speak louder than our united voices, loosed with the strength of an open fist, gathered with the intensity of a major system, gale force winds of change blowing down upheld deranged doctrines of dominance. In the wreckage, we find the voices of the fallen, whispering in our ears. Their first and final calls for justice sweep over our heated faces, kiss our salt tears, and recall the mission bestowed on everyone here. Because every woman in the world is my sister, because she lives among us and wonders if she's next, defies the powers that be that tell her not to fret, that there's no problem. Because every woman in the world is my sister, and she fights hard to challenge the blind acceptance of her stalwart existence in the line of both enemy and friendly fire. For the 14 women of École Polytechnique de Montréal and every other person assaulted and gunned down, I resolve to raise my voice in support of the right of every woman to live free, safe, and protected wherever she chooses, to excel in her passion and ability in whatever she chooses, and to know comfort and contentment in her sacred life. Geneviève Bergeron is my sister. Nathalie Croteau is my sister. Anne-Marie Edouard is my sister. Maryse Lagagnère is my sister. Anne-Marie Lemay is my sister. Michelle Richard is my sister. Annie Turcotte is my sister. Hélène Colgan is my sister. Barbara Daigneault is my sister. Maude Avernique is my sister. Maryse Leclerc is my sister. Sonia Pelletier is my sister. Annie Saint-Arnaud is my sister. And Barbara Klucznik-Wygajewicz is my sister. Thank you.
Thank you, Shima. That was absolutely beautiful. Once again, you are such a powerful force, and your words mean so much. Art can help us commemorate and to remember, and it's such an integral part of our collective experience, and it brings us together and it educates us and makes us better people and a better society. So thank you, Shima, for this piece, and also thank you for coming and sharing it with us. It's such an honor that you are part of this each year, and please for everybody here, this is one of Shima's wonderful pieces, and maybe someone can share the link, and I apologize, I didn't get myself ready to do that, but you can actually purchase where Shima has read other pieces, including this one, and listen to them at other times. And because of the power of art to reflect, it is awesome. So I would encourage anybody who can to do so. So thank you, Shima, for joining us and being here today. It's really, really helpful to this event. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, Siobhan. It's always an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. So now we would, as part of the commemorative part, we would like to go into a moment of silence. And so during that time, we will show the images of all of those women, because as we know, that is part of why we've gathered today. So I will leave it here. So for wherever you are, let us take this moment together. Thank you, everybody. As we know, and has been said by the wonderful people that we have heard from today, about the importance of this day being about two sides. It's about the side of commemorating and remembering to honor those. And as you saw in that last slide, that it is about those 14 women who were students and were killed because they were women. But it's about all of those other women since that time, because we know that unfortunately, this hasn't ended, and the need for us to come together still exists. And this year, maybe it was highlighted even stronger way. And the importance, as Shiva said, to see, and I think this is really important, to see all that in the invisible work, but also the invisible struggle of that. And that's not a way for us to do the next part of our work, which is about today, which is to come together, to recommit and to acknowledge what this is about. And Shiva talked about a lot about where it's at in terms of this happening and what those kind of contributing factors are. And to oversimplify it, this is about power. This violence is coming from power. And so that means that us as activists, as union leaders, as other leaders, need to make change. That means that we will be having a more equal society. And so that we know will reduce violence. And so the awareness, the education is very important, but we also have to come together and really identify what changes are needed, because every policy change, every idea or action that we take needs to have an intersectional feminist lens on it. And because it needs to be contributing to the reduction of the inequality, and then it will require, that will mean that we will have a reduction in the violence. The UN this year called this a shadow pandemic because of all of the things that we've been talking about today, which is during this time, women, whether they were losing their their income, losing their jobs, losing their support networks, meant that this was going back behind closed doors. And that is dangerous. It is dangerous because, as Shima said, this is a societal issue. We talk about it in the labor movement. This is a workplace issue because we all have a role to play to help people who are going through it, but we all have a role to play in order to reduce the violence that's happening. And so when we look at these policies that could happen, it's important for us to talk about it in the lens of poverty. When we have a large inequality, that's where there's a big power change. And so when we have women living in poverty, it makes it difficult to leave. It makes it difficult to take steps, but it also, and we know this from studies that have been done, it also just contributes to the occurrence of violence. And so this means that all people should have access to good jobs. We need to get rid of the wage inequity in Alberta, which is still the largest in the country. We need to talk about minimum wage because when we look at this under an intersectional feminist lens, we know that it is women primarily who work, like the majority of minimum wage workers are women. We also know that unions have played a big role in ensuring the wage gap reducing. And so that means we need to support unions. So when there's legislation or motions of regulations that are going to make unions less able to function, that is in essence meaning that you are not in favor of those goals when it comes to gender equity. And so we also want to talk about childcare. And this pandemic has kind of highlighted childcare in the mainstream more than it has in the past. And so, as the sisters have said before me, we need childcare. We need a universal childcare. And as the activist said a generation ago, we need childcare. We need a system of childcare that is accessible for all people. And as people have been saying for a very long time, it's not just a commitment for during political times. There needs to be an actual investment, not only for the workers, not only for the kids, but for the parents, and especially for women who still take care of the majority of unpaid work, and that includes childcare. And so public services. So as we see in Alberta, where our public services are under attack, if it's women who are accessing these services, it is women who are providing these services, and this is by extension an attack on women. And unfortunately, that is the reality we see in Alberta, is that there hasn't been enough attention to look at these policies and these changes that are being made with an intersectional feminist lens. So as we get through COVID, and we're going to get through it, and we're going to get past it, or we're going to live with it, but we're going to get past this emergency side of it, and we're going to rebuild the economy. I've read many articles from, quite famous economists talking about that the economy is done as we know it, and the economy is not going to work, and so rebuilding is going to be so difficult. Well, I think what is important is that we rebuild an economy that actually works for people. Because before this happened, it wasn't working for so many people. It was not providing a society where people could succeed, or where we took care of people before we worried about bank accounts and profit. And so when we look at this economy, I hope we all understand that let's rethink it. Let's rethink it so that it works for people. Because if we reduce that inequality, we will reduce the violence, and that we can get to a world where people are safer. And so together we know what we're going to do. We're going to gather, we're going to talk about it. We're going to support organizations like the Alberta Council Women's Shelter. We're going to support organizations like SHIVA is from, that are doing such important work. And we are also going to do the work that is attached to policy work for more gender equity. And so that's why we need to call out this government when they make decisions and put in legislation that are attacking women. And that's why together we need to do that work. And so thank you so much for coming today. Thank you for all of our guests today, who were absolutely wonderful. It is wonderful to see and hear voices from such powerful women. And that's really appreciated. And so what we are going to do is share that link for the Justice Fund. This is a fund we started up last year, and it is for Indigenous It's to help Indigenous women and on-reserve shelters in kind of costs that aren't covered by maybe traditional kind of programs or grants. And so in this last year, it's been used from everything from transportation to get people to services because there was challenges to do that if you're isolated and the services are centralized. It was also used to assist families whose kids obviously weren't able to go to school, but that was just another added barrier to them participating in school, is because of maybe the transitions they were in as families, and so the funds were used there. And so we're very happy about this partnership we've made with the Alberta Council of Women's Shelters, and really thank Jan for her leadership and work there. And so if you're able, the AFL is donating $2,500. Our council approved that, and our unions are donating the money that would have normally been set on tickets. Many of them are going to take that money and then donate it to this fund. And so if you're able, that link is there. And thank you, Chris, for posting that. We ask you that, but otherwise we are just so very happy that you were able to join us today. I would like to acknowledge who else is here with us, because I think it's important to know. So first off, these events, and if I'm sure you know, takes time and effort. And so I just really want to thank the AFL Council Women's Equity Reps for their help and assistance in forming what this event looked like. And just given the technology, we didn't have them introduce speakers, which is normally what we love to do at this event, but it seemed a little bit easier to kind of streamline it today. And so that's Cheryl Watamaniak, that's Kathleen Mulabusi, who are from UFCW and CUPW, respectfully. And then the alternate women's reps, which are Charmaine St. Germain and Sherry Carter. And so thank you for not only the work that they're doing for this event, but their ongoing work and being on the council to make sure that that women's issues are talked about and that we're making change for that. I also want to acknowledge our amazing staff, Maria and Helen and Leah, who did such great work putting getting all these details together, and then Susan, Ramona, and Chris and Tony, who make it so possible so we can do the work that we do. And then of course, Emma Pike, who is the person behind the scenes today to make sure everybody is able to speak when they need to speak. And then also we're seeing the slides at the right time. So thank you to everybody for their work. We also have politicians in the room, so to speak. So I want to acknowledge Janice Irwin, who is the critic on the status of women and does fantastic work there, and Christina Gray, who's the critic on labor, which does, again, such an integral part to us getting equity is those two files. Also, we have David Shepard and Irfan Sabir, Joe Cece, John Carson, Marie Renaud, Marlon Schmidt, Richard Fian, all from one party, but we thank you for coming. And then we have some school trustees, and Trish Estabrooks and Sheila Dunn are here. And so if I missed anyone, I apologize. It's difficult to check the list while I'm reading it, so I pulled it a little bit a while ago. So, but thank you again for joining us. Thank you for sharing this time with us so that we could commemorate. And I look forward to our continued work together. So please stay safe, find your joy during this time, and we will do this work together. And so now we are going to have a couple more pieces by Dale. And so again, a huge thank you to her for sharing her art with us. And so as she gets upgraded and ready to play, I will just, again, just a huge thank you. And I can see some messages going up. So thank you, everybody. We are the community that will keep coming together, however makes sense for the time. So enjoy some wonderful music before you leave the webinar, and otherwise we will see you on the other side. Bye. Thank you.